My name's Adan Rivera. I'm from Silver City, New Mexico, and my story is a little different from the rest of the guys in the fact that I was very fortunate in having a, a, a very knowledgeable teacher when I was in the 7th grade, and he taught civics. And the first thing every morning was he would bring in the Albuquerque Journal, and he would assign different areas of the journal to different students to read, not aloud, but to read to themselves. And then after everybody had read their assigned items, we would discuss them. So at that time, there were rumblings, let's put it that way, that there were that North Korea might invade South Korea, and that the Chinese would eventually come into the picture. And anyway, the discussion with our teacher, he said, it is eventually, within 5 years, that's the way he put it. He said, within 5 years, some of you guys are going to be involved in a war, and which was a little disturbing, you know, because we had just gone through one world war. But anyway, he said, many of you are going to be involved in the war, he said. I hate to see, I hope, what was this? I pray to God that I'm wrong, he said, but I don't think there's any way that we can stop it. It's going to happen. And he says, and eventually our biggest enemy is not going to be where the war starts, but our biggest enemy is going to be China. And I remember telling, his name was Joseph B. Anderson, and he had been an educator for many years. He had retired, and he had been a superintendent, but he was a very knowledgeable individual. And he told, and I told Mr. Anderson, I said, Mr. Anderson, how can China be our enemy when they've been with us throughout the Second World War? He says, China was with us because they needed us against Japan, is the way he said it. But eventually you will be involved in the war. Well, needless to say, time went on, and the rumblings of war kept getting more intense. And finally, when it did happen, he had already passed away. But his prophetic words, when it did happen, excuse me, remained with me for all the time that I was in the service. And every time that I think about him, I remember his words. Anyway, in 1950, when it finally did happen, some of my classmates, older classmates that I had been through school with, started getting their classifications, 1A classifications, and well, and so 1A, that meant you had a ticket to go to war. So when I got my classification, which was in 1951, I was still in school. I was in my senior year, because I would have gotten out of school in 52. So anyway, I started debating whether to go in at that time, quit school and go in, volunteer before they drafted me, because I wanted my choice of service. Well, time kept going on, and finally, when at the end in November of 1951, I decided I might as well go. I was already 18, and I was sure that I would be next to be drafted. So I wanted to go into something that I chose. So I enlisted, and and I went to Albuquerque and enlisted over there, and I went through right away. They put me through the tests, physical, mental and physical, academic, and so the recruiter told me after I had gone through all my tests, he said, "You made it," he said, "but we're not going to take you right away." He said, the holidays are coming up, and the companies won't be forming until after the first of the year anyway, the training companies. So he said, we'll probably, what we'll probably do is give you some traveling orders for January 2nd of 1952. So that's what he did. And I went on the 2nd, and that evening I started out for 4 years of service to my country. And in the meantime, some of my friends that had gone before me, some of them had come back wounded, and some seriously, others not so serious, but I was glad that I was able to choose because when they were drafted, the ones that came back wounded had been drafted, and so I was glad that I was able to choose my career, my branch of service. Anyway, I went through boot camp in San Diego. I graduated in March, late March, from boot camp, and April the 1st I went aboard ship, and a week later I was on my way to Japan. My home bases were in the United States, were San Diego, and in Japan it was Sasebo, Japan. And my work was mainly repairing motors. I was a motor rewinder, and I wound up an electrician's mate. I started out as an electronics technician, and but the electronics shop where I would be working was a little cubicle, and we had more equipment in there it was a real cramped space, and I was used to the New Mexico wide open spaces. So I told my division officer after 6 months of that, when we got ready to come back to the States, he told me, he says, "I'm going to send you to electronics school." And so I told him, I said, "Mr. Brown, I would prefer that you send me to the electrician's maid school." He says, "Why?" I says, "I am used to the wide open spaces, and that little cubicle up there where I'm at, it's very claustrophobic to me. I'll be a wreck before the year's over." So he said, "Do you realize what you're giving up?" And I told him, I says, "Yes." He says, "Okay, if that's what you want." So when we got back in July of '52, I went to EM school. Well, I went home first, and then I went to EM school, and I graduated. I think it was anyway, just before the Christmas. I know I was home for Christmas, because after I got back, I had two weeks leave, and I went back to San Diego, and then I was on my second trip overseas, and that's the way it went. Well, that and I was gone another 6 months in overseas, and I made 3 deployments to the Far East while I was in the service. And like I said, my job was rewinding electric motors and generators, and of course the ship's job was to fix anything. We had deep sea divers, we had machinists made. We repaired anything from watches to 16-inch guns on battleships. Anything that came along, it was an auxiliary repair, most of it, because some of it was pretty bad. The damage was pretty bad, so that we fixed the ship enough to where they could get to dry docks, and that was our job. That's what we did for the full 4 years that I was in the service, and that's my story.